And once again, a very warm welcome to all of our attendees this morning. To start off with, we just want to let you know that IOPSA is inviting you to attend the Plumbing Industry Awards happening on the 28th of July, 2022 at the Royal Elephant Hotel and Conference Center. This will start at 6 o'clock on the 28th of July. So if you need to register, remember this black tie event is happening out in July, and it's an awesome event to be able to go through to and mingle with those who have really achieved some great things in the industry. So if you'd like to contact marketing@iopsa.org, please get in touch with them and register for this event. Then a very quick reminder about the tips to prevent COVID-19. Remember to wash your hands, use sanitizer if you can, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Still need to continue with that social distancing, as well as avoiding close contact with people who are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with an elbow or tissue, and then also clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. Now, if you can, we're obviously still encouraging you to get vaccinated if that is your decision. This morning, we are looking at electricity, and our safety thought for this week is don't put your life on the line. Now, a lot of electric cables, a lot of electric lines that are constantly worked on by yourselves as plumbing contractors. Perhaps you do a bit of both, plumbing and electrical, but regardless of whether you're an electrical contractor or not, as a plumber, you work with portable electrical tools. You work with electrical extension cables. And this means that you are working with electricity, perhaps not being an electrician yourself, but you are working with this dangerous source of exposure. And so we don't want you to put your life on the line by missing out vital elements of ensuring that your health and safety is looked after when working with this type of danger. Now, in 2019, we had incident and accident stats that came out from our Compensation Commissioner's annual report. And they told us that 8,000 workers were seriously injured in 1 year because they used defective portable electrical equipment, such as angle grinders, drills, and sanders. Now, you might think to yourself, wow, for the entire SA, 8,000 workers in 1 year, that's not a lot of people. That's a very small percentage. Yes, it is. It is a small percentage when we look at things like car accidents, when we look at people being bumped or crushed on construction sites with yellow vehicles or yellow machinery. Also, the stats of falling from heights, off roofs, scaffolding, cherry pickers, that's also a much higher statistic. But just because the stats are low, or the amount of people being injured is low, does not mean that it's not a good idea for us to ensure that the work that is done is not done correctly. And so, according to these types of reports, we start understanding and start seeing that it's vital for us to prevent small incidents and accidents from happening so that the larger incidents and accidents also do not occur. Now, you might say, well, Chris, how is it possible that stopping 8,000 workers being seriously injured by electrical equipment will stop us from falling off roofs or stop car accidents? Well, we're not saying that there's a direct correlation between the two. What we are saying is that these 8,000 workers were seriously injured. Many more thousands were only injured to a minor degree. The end result was still that there was an injury because of some sort of unsafe act or unsafe condition. Now, you'll notice in this one, there are two. There's an unsafe act as well as an unsafe condition that occurred. Number one, they used. In other words, using something means that they acted in a certain manner. So using something means you are acting. So it's an active form of performing a task. But in this case, it was defective portable electrical equipment. So using that defective portable electrical equipment means that they acted in an unsafe manner. The other condition that existed was that there was actually defective portable electrical equipment available to the employees. So both of these cases tell us that there is a serious problem. It's not just the condition that's arising, but the actual act of performing unsafe work is also happening. Now, first of all, we want to avoid both of these things. We want to try and encourage employees to do some due diligence before they start working with a tool, to do a visual inspection. Now, we know that all of your safety files incorporate registers and checklists. And so on your register, you will have all the tools, the power tools, or the equipment that you are working with on a particular site. And that register will give you the serial numbers. It will say how many tools you are using on the site, how many portable tools you're using. And so you are fitted then into a category of low risk, medium risk, or high risk based on that register. Because the register will tell us, is the tools that you're using very dangerous? And so based on that register, we also look at your risk assessment to see if you covered all the dangers of working with those tools. But on top of that, there's a checklist that has to be carried out. And for portable electrical tools, according to your construction regulations, it has to be carried out every single week. Now, we know that some companies say, well, you're only working with an electrical drill. It's not going to be core drilling. It's not heavy drilling. It's literally just putting in a few anchor points for a couple of conduit piping. So it's a couple of Fisher plugs, a 6mm drill bit. It's nothing too hectic. So we don't require you to check your drill every single week according to construction regs. We are going to tell you you can check it monthly. That's fine. Again, this is not based on a thumb suck. It's based on risk. If your risk is lower, then it is acceptable to check it perhaps every month. But if your risk is higher and you fall into a different category, then you have to check it every week. Now, on the mines where there's a very high risk, they look at all risk the same. In other words, whether you're drilling with small Fisher plugs and a 6mm drill bit or you core drilling, they are going to say that it is high risk because it is mine standard, and you will have to inspect that portable electrical tool every single day. Now, many people say, Chris, we don't understand. When we go from one site, the safety officer says we need to check it every month. Now we get to this new site, we're using the same documentation, similar safety file because we're doing the same work. And this safety officer needs us to inspect it every day. Why is the difference? Why are we being targeted? And please understand that that is not the case. Some safety officers are just a little bit more pedantic. They just want you to check it more often because they view your risk as a little bit higher. And that doesn't mean that they are wrong. Please understand that. They're not trying to give you more work just for the sake of giving you more paperwork. They are trying to ensure that you yourself and the employees using that equipment take seriously that incidents and accidents do happen with the use of defective portable electrical equipment. And as we mentioned, there are two things that we are trying to fix. One is the behavioral aspect. So when somebody performs an unsafe act, they are doing something that is unsafe, like using defective portable equipment. 100% we're looking at the employee in this case, the user of that tool. And so we want to try and help them from a behavioral standpoint to understand the dangers of using defective portable electrical equipment, because that unsafe act can be stopped. It can be prevented. But on the other hand, the unsafe condition of an employer allowing his employees to work with unsafe tools is now an unsafe condition that exists in the working environment. That can also be prevented by simply ensuring that the employer does their due diligence as well as conform to what regulation states, is not issuing any tools or portable electrical equipment that is defective or damaged. Now, this is done in many ways. The employer himself oftentimes cannot physically look at that piece of equipment all the time, but what he can do is ensure that registers and checklists are completed, maintenance schedules are in place to ensure that tools are cared for and looked after. Training can be paid for to ensure that the store person or the person that looks after the equipment is adequately trained and competent to keep these tools in a safe working condition. Then it comes back down to the employee. Use it in a safe manner and also do a visual inspection before you use it to ensure that it is safe to use. So then it comes down to who is responsible for these defective tools that are being used and to prevent the defective tools? Well, everyone is. The employer is ultimately responsible because you are creating the conditions for employees to work. And if those conditions are dangerous, then you are responsible for those dangers. But the employee as well, if you perform an unsafe act, even though that condition exists, you are still competing in it. And so if you are working in it, you are adding to it, you are basically just as likely to get injured, in fact, more likely to get injured because you are the user of that tool. And so the risk then moves to you. And so you also become responsible and to a degree liable for that incident. So ultimately, always the employer, but the employee, don't just think just because your employer gave it to you, that automatically he is the only one responsible, she's the only one responsible. Now, the Department of Labor has issued regulations to protect you. These regulations are available. You can read through them. It will give you guidelines on what to do during any incident or rather task, not incident, any work that you're performing with electricity. Now, the electrical installation regulations are obviously developed to protect the electrician, first of all, working on the electrical equipment, installing the electrical equipment, as well as the user of that equipment. You see, the electrician is not banned from all hazards. When there's no electricity and it's just cables that are being installed, there are other normal risks and hazards. The use of tools, sharp objects, or even the cables themselves can become a slipping or tripping hazard. But when the electrician now tests the electricity, well, that's where the electrical contact comes into place, and now it becomes very, very serious, very dangerous. But once that's done, there is a constant flow of electricity, and the user of that electricity, plugging in equipment, plugging in portable electrical tools, needs to be kept safe as well. And so what are we trying to keep you safe from? Well, these exact situations, these 8,000 people that are being seriously injured every single year because of non-conforming electrical tools. But it could also come from overloading these electrical installations. Now, as an electrician, you know what your responsibility is and your responsibility toward the end user to ensure it is safe for them as well. So if you don't understand it, if you don't know what your responsibility is, go and download this regulation. It's called the Electrical Installation Regulations. You can download it in PDF or even through the Department of Labor's website. So let's look at a few things that this regulation tells us must be in place. And we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of an electrician, but also of a user. So this user could be any person. It doesn't have to be an electrician specifically. It could even be yourself as a plumber. The very first and most important thing is all electrical work. And now we're talking about obviously electrical installations must be carried out by a registered person that is competent. Again, this is a person that has the degrees or the training as an electrician. They've got their qualifications. They've been trained, they've been qualified, and they've got experience in their field of electrical work. Obviously, this is regulated in government. And so if you claim to be an electrician, you need to be able to prove that. So there should be some sort of documentation behind that. Now, when we talk about competency, this is an electrical contractor, an electrician that is actually performing the work. What about the user? Do you need to be competent in using a drill? Well, yes, of course. It might not be the same in-depth course that you have to go and do like an electrician. Perhaps it could just be an internal course. It could be something developed in-house by your own company, taking the risks and hazards of using a drill, the manufacturer's guidelines on the safe use of that drill, and then developing it into a little training session for your users of machinery. You see, now you're changing the behavior of the person to understand the dangers and then say to them, using defective tools is not good. Let's say out of those 8,000 people, you could help 10%. So what is 10% of 8,000? 800 people. Imagine you could help 800 people by just doing a session of training every few months on drills. Well, you might say to yourself, again, that's a very small percentage, Chris. Well, let me ask you, what if you were one of those 800? Does it now help you? Does it mean that you might not have been injured as the user of those machines if you had given or been given that training by your employer? As employers, do you want your staff, the 10, 20, 30, 40 staff members that you have, to be trained and competent? Well, imagine all of your staff were part of that 8,000, and then you cut it down by 10%, and all of your staff were then part of that 800 who were not injured. Just think of what that could mean for you as a company, what it could mean for you economically, making sure that your company can still run with employees. Now, Section 4 of the same electrical installation regulation says that any alterations or changes done, so if there's any changes done to electrical components or work, obviously it must be done under the supervision of a competent electrician. It must be signed off, and a new certificate of compliance must be given. Certificate of compliance comes under Section 7 of these regulations, and Section 7.4 says that any alterations must also be done. Now, the supplier, which is obviously Eskom, will be able to grant you this COC, which is in the form of an Annexure 1, but they might say to you, you know, that type of work doesn't require you to issue a new COC. It's fine. That can only come from them. It can only come from the supplier. It cannot come from an actual electrician unless he's got some sort of document from the supplier to prove that you do not need a COC for those specific alterations. Then under Section 8.1, if there is any massive work that needs to be undertaken, then an Annexure 4 document needs to be sent through to the Department of Labor. And you need to notify them to state that these types of works are going to be taking place. What does this all mean? Well, it means that there's certain regulations that must be followed, certain documentation that needs to be always accessible, whether it's a COC document, whether it's your compliance and accreditation as an electrician, whether it's a register or a checklist of the tools that you are using. There is documentation that needs to be put in place. And so all this documentation obviously will form part of your health and safety file. Now, under the Consumer Protection Safety Commission, this is a US-based company. They say that in the US alone, about 4,000 injuries associated with electrical extension cords. Now, this is obviously just a normal extension cable or even a cable that is attached to a power drill, a power sander, power grinder. All of these electrical cords have affected 4,000 people and sustained injuries, which obviously have been treated, but half of these involved fractures, lacerations, contusions, or sprains from tripping over electrical extension cords. So aside from the electrical aspect, the way we use it and how we handle it has caused fractures, lacerations, contusions, or sprains from tripping over electrical extension cords. You might think, well, it's not as dangerous as the electricity itself. Well, we agree. But about 3,300 residential fires occur because of extension cords every year. This is killing about 50 people and injuring about 270 others. This is every single year because of defective equipment. So where does safety normally start? Where do we normally tell our kids, charity starts at home? Safety officers, safety starts at home. Everything kind of starts at home. Why? Because it's a behavior that we develop. Now, the most frequent causes of fires, which come through from these 3,300 residential fires, are short circuits, overloading, damage, and misuse of extension cords. Now, we cannot find these stats in the construction industry. We cannot find these stats here in SA because people are just not giving in the information. When something like this goes wrong, they are not notifying the Department of Labor. They're hiding it in-house because they're worried that there's going to be some sort of penalty that comes to them from the Department of Labor. But if this is happening in residential homes where we are wanting to protect our families, how much more is it happening in our own businesses where we are tired sometimes, where we're taking shortcuts to get the job done quicker? You see, if the behavior is not there when we're at home, why would the behavior be there when we are at work? So what are we trying to then say? Well, there are two major issues. Number one are the unsafe acts on behalf of employees, doing things that is unsafe. And the other one is employers who are allowing unsafe conditions to be prevalent in their working environment. These are the things constantly affecting your employees. So here are 8 things you must do. And this is employer and employee. We are reaching out to both of you. Please be aware of potential hazards on your portable electrical equipment. Check all plugs, plug jackets, terminal screws, cords regularly. Report any defects immediately. Handle all portable electrical equipment with care. Ask your artisan, your electrician, to please check the wiring and plugs, or send it to an electrician to have it checked. And then do regular visual inspections and checks. What are you looking for? Any damage that could potentially cause harm to you as the user, any damage that could potentially cause harm to somebody around you. And then ask yourself, have you actually checked all of your tools? You know, most companies, you will then download just a normal standard document. So these standard or sample checklists are brilliant. They help you, but it is a sample. It is a standard checklist. Standard means it's the minimum requirement. So what must you do? Well, you need to take a register like this. You can either get in touch with us and tell us these are the tools that we have, but they're specialized tools. So the checklist that we have doesn't cover the cord, or it doesn't cover the casing, or it doesn't cover the dead man switch. There's so many areas that it doesn't cover. Well, let us design one that does cover these things. You see, it's not just the fact that you have a document. Is that document adequate for what you are using it for? Let's say that you've got an electrical COC. You can do a normal DB box at home, residential. Can that same COC be used for a massive construction site, building a school or building a hospital? Well, no, you have to, there's so many different variables involved in that it's a different COC. It's a different set of installations. It's not going to be the exact same thing. It's still a COC, but the information in that COC is widely different compared to residential and perhaps a hospital. So when you are doing an inspection, just because you have a checklist does not mean you are safe. We need to look at the content of that checklist. We need to see that what you are checking is the necessary requirements for that portable electrical tool that you are using. Please remember, safety should be a collective effort. Don't wait for your employer to do something about it. If you know that there's something wrong, bring it to the attention of your employer. And what if your employer doesn't do it? Well, is there a possibility for you to be able to do it? Can you get in touch with me? Tell me, Chris, the register and checklist that we are using is not correct. Tell me what is not correct about it. Give me some more information about the tool. Let me change that document for you and send it through to you so that you can make sure that you adequately check the tools that you are working with. And if necessary, let's talk to your employer. We're not going to come down on them. We're not going to penalize them. All we want to do is help them to understand what is required. And hopefully we can win them over to be able to implement this as a normal function throughout the company. Remember, we are there to help you. You don't have to be alone in this situation. So when portable electrical equipment, such as angle grinders, are used, obviously you need to check discs, you need to check the guards are in place, you need to check a whole lot of other things because of the dangers of using an angle grinder, including the personal protective equipment that you have to use. But when last did you check the plug? When last did you see if the actual ground is in place? Many guys are cutting plugs off on their own. They're not getting it checked. The wiring is not done correctly, or they're damaging the wiring and quickly fixing it themselves. You know, a little bit of tape goes a long way in fixing your portable electrical tool, but are we doing it correctly? Is it possible that the earth conductor terminal needs to be tightened, or the cord jacket has slipped out of its grip? Loose conductors can cause short circuits, and the person touching the appliance or tool can suffer a shock or injury. Is this possible? Well, let's take a look at a case study. A missing third prong from an electrical plug resulted in the electrocution and death of an employee. This is somebody who died because of the incorrect use of portable electrical equipment that was not safe. So an unsafe act as well as an unsafe condition. They were climbing a ladder to hand a power drill to another worker. They weren't even using the drill themselves. They were just climbing the ladder to pass that drill to somebody else who needed to use it. When they were shocked and they died. Please remember, this cost a person their life. Now, when they did the investigation, they found that the extension cord was missing its grounding prong. The grounding wire and the frame of the drill were being electrified off and on by the energizing wire, by the live wire. And this drill was also not double insulated. Obviously, climbing on that ladder, they touched the ladder to the cord as well as their body, and they electrocuted themselves to death. That person will never work again. The employer will be asked why one of their employees died on site. They will be held liable for that death. You do not want to be that employee, and you do not want to be the employer of that employee. So why not make the change? Don't put your life on the line. Don't allow faulty equipment, the condition that exists, as well as the unsafe use of such equipment to cost you your life. Don't let it cost you the life of your employee. Make the change now. So thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to these Toolbox Talks. We really appreciate it. Next week, we are looking at arriving alive. This is obviously road accidents, what you can do. Obviously, there's different things. We're not going to touch too much on road rage. We're just going to look at how to drive on our roads. What are certain things that you can do to protect yourself, especially your employees, while driving on dangerous roads? So thank you very much for joining us. Just a very big thank you to everybody's patience on the Prime course. The technical glitch was 100% on my side. I thought that they could get started with the first courses, but unfortunately they needed the skeleton of the entire Prime course right up to the last course that is designed even for the end of the year before they could actually upload it to the LMS system. So that was on my side. I truly do apologize, but I also want to say thank you for your patience in waiting until that Prime course is available. I do believe that it is all now sorted out. And so in the next coming days, you will have access to this. So once again, thank you very much for your patience.